And tell me you're right. There we go. All right. So good evening. It's almost dark. Close enough. We are studying tonight. You can tell by the monitor on the front of the room because we have about a month to go before Purim. It's good to know what's coming up and what the holiday is before it happens, because if I tell you about it the day before Purim, then you don't have a chance to get ready. And Purim is a holiday that does take some getting ready. Just fun and games. Purim often seems like a kid's holiday. It's a very adult holiday, but we make it fun for kids. So you'll see as we go through all the different ways. All right, so in order to understand Purim, we have to understand the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther is, of course, the story that becomes the holiday of Purim. And to understand the story, you have to know what's going on. So after the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon in 586, many Jews were taken east. They went into what we now call Iraq of the world, and they were forced to live there. This was the Babylonians' policy of moving around populations to keep them from rebelling. But the Babylonians were taken over by the Persians. The Persians came from what we now call Iran. The Persians took over the Babylonians, and the Persians, they had a much better policy, more flexible and tolerant of religious and ethnic minorities. So they told the Jews, you could go back to the land of Israel. And many Jews did. And many Jews stayed. They stayed in the Persian Empire. Israel was still part of the Persian Empire, not the only part. And many Jews stayed in Iraq. Many Jews moved into Iran, Persia proper, if you will. They weren't called those, but just so you can have a picture in your head. And the Jewish population was spread all across the Persian Empire during this time. And the basic idea was we were good citizens. You know, we paid our taxes, we followed the Persian laws, but we also followed Judaism. And that was all we wanted. Make sense? Okay. The story of Purim takes place in the palace or the capital of Shushan, which was a real city called Susa in Persian. And we know exactly where it is. You can see the archaeology of what they've dug up from this place. So, what is the basic story? I'm not going to redo the entire book of Esther. You can go read the 10 chapters. It's not long. It is a fascinating story. Read it slowly and carefully, because there's a lot that's happening for the characters like Harry Potter. Right? It's not written like a simple story where the author gives you all the information and tells you what to think. Short style where you have to think for yourself. You have to figure out what's going on and understand why people are doing what they're doing and see how they develop. And that's really, really important, especially for Purim, more so than even other holidays. And we'll come back to why. So let me give you the basic framework of the story. So Ahasuerus is the king of Persia, who he was in like Persian, but this is what he's called in the Hebrew text. Ahasuerus, and usually in the English pronunciation, or Ahashverosh in the Hebrew pronunciation. He's the king. And he gets rid of his previous wife named Vashti. Vashti was his first wife, if you will, well, his chief wife, because he had lots of wives. Because the emperor back then used to have a harem, hundreds and hundreds of women that he could just be with whenever he felt like it. And that was Vashti. And he gets rid of her because she disobeys him. She doesn't do what he tells her. And eventually he gets lonely and decides he needs to get a new pretty girl. And so he takes all the pretty girls from all over the empire, right? This is not volunteering. This is, if you're pretty, they take you to the palace, and he rapes them, right? Each night, a new one is brought to him, and he sleeps with them. They don't get to say yes or no, which that is the definition of rape. After he's done with them, they go to the harem. And maybe he'll call for them some other time, but pretty much he's just restocking his harem with new pretty girls. And one of the girls that's brought in is called Esther, and her Hebrew name is Hadassah. And we find out that some people had a Hebrew name and a name for the language that they live in. Joshua and Yehoshua. She's Esther, and her Hebrew name is Hadassah, and she's brought in, and he likes her best, right? After he has been with her, he likes her best. So she becomes the new queen. This is not like Queen Elizabeth, the queen. This is the main wife that he is going to queen, but she's not really supposed to have a whole lot of power. That's going to change over the story. But at the beginning, she's what you might call a trophy wife, right? She's the wife that he just wants to bring out and show his friends. Esther has a cousin uncle. It's a little unclear, and lots of different commentary on that. Not for tonight. Called Mordechai. And Mordechai is involved with the government of Persia. He's like a bureaucrat. He works for the government. Not high in the government. He's somewhere in the middle. And he's Jewish, and everybody knows he's Jewish. And he tells her, don't tell the king you're Jewish. Anybody, you're Jewish. He doesn't say why. So we have to sort of figure out why he's telling her this, but for him that we get to wrestle with. And so she doesn't tell anyone. Mordechai hears two people plotting to kill the king. Esther tells the king, and the two people that are plotting, they're killed. And yay, Mordechai has saved the king. I called Mordechai, he did this. And so they write down in the big book of thank yous that Mordechai saved the king. How are we doing? Okay, short version. There's a lot more detail, but this is the short version. Along comes a guy named Haman, or Haman. Haman is the villain. Ooh, he's the bad guy. Right. Is number 2 in the kingdom, right? So there's the king, and then there's Haman. That's it, and then everybody else. When Haman becomes this powerful person, he tells everybody that they need to bow down to him. And so when he goes out, he expects all the other people who work for the king to bow down. Mordechai doesn't. Mordechai refuses to bow down. Haman gets a little angry with this, right? He is really, really frustrated that Mordechai won't obey him, won't bow to him. And so he decides to choose because Mordechai won't bow to him. Seem a little extreme, right? Well, there's a couple different ways to understand this. One is some people really are just that violent and mean. That if you don't do what they say, they'll kill you, your family, your family's family, and anybody you've ever known. But another way to understand this is the politics of Persia, which is Persia is made up of all these different little groups. We say that there's 127 different tribes of Persia, and it goes all the way from India down to Ethiopia. If you kill one person who's important in a group, what do you think the rest of that group is going to do to you? Right? They're going to seek revenge. That's how politics works. Right? I hurt this group, that group hurts me, then I hurt that group hurts me. The only way to be safe, if I'm going to hurt an important person as part of a group, is to kill the whole group. Then there's nobody to do revenge. What Haman is planning here is to make sure that he can't be have any revenge against him for what he's planning to do to Mordechai. So when everybody finds out that he is going to do this, everybody's rather upset. Everybody's rather afraid. And Mordechai goes and talks to Esther, convinces her to help. And Esther's really reluctant. She's like, well, the king, I can't just go and talk to the king when I feel like it. Back in Persia, so powerful and so wonderful that even his wife couldn't visit him without an invitation. To come into the king's courtroom, you needed an invitation. And the king hadn't invited her anytime recently. So what's she supposed to do? Just sit back and wait? And Mordechai says, you're just going to have to go. So she literally risks her own life by going to talk to her husband. That's how messed up the Persian life was. So she goes to talk to the king. And the king doesn't kill her. Comes up with a plan to invite him and Haman to a party. And she's going to reveal that she's Jewish and save the day. But even as Haman is so happy that he's going to be invited to this party, just him and the king and the queen, across Mordecai again. Mordecai still won't bow, and he's like, I'm so angry. And his family says, dear, don't be angry. Just kill the guy already. Because that's what you do when you want to feel better. Just kill a few people and you'll feel better. And so Haman decides, okay, that's what I'll do. But he gets to the king to ask for permission to kill Mordecai. Ahasuerus is sitting up at night. He can't sleep. And he's asking for the clerk, the guy who helps the king, to read him some of the different things that people have done that were good. The story of Mordecai. Remember Mordecai who saved the king from the plot that they were going to kill him and all of that? And he's like, ooh, that was nice. How did we reward him? And they say, well, there's no reward that we did. We didn't do anything. He's like, we need to fix that. I need to get some opinions. Because Ahasuerus, he didn't really have a mind of his own. He always needed to ask everyone else's opinion about the whole story. And they says, who's around to give an opinion? Well, there's Haman. Haman's waiting outside. Haman, because he wanted to ask permission to kill Mordecai. He comes in. The king says, so, Haman, I want to honor somebody. What do you think I should do? And Haman thinks, ooh, the king wants to honor me. And so he begins to say, well, you should put him in the king's clothes, and you should let him ride the king's horse, and you should have an important person in the town saying, this is how the king honors people. And Ahasuerus goes, perfect plan. You do it for Mordecai. It's just, the ultimate knock the legs out from under him. So Haman is forced to do this. And before he can even catch his breath, he then goes off to the party, reveals that she's Jewish, and now Haman is totally terrified. And the king tells the queen that she can do whatever she wants to defend her people. And so they give permission to fight back. And when the people come to attack them that were part of Haman's team, the Jews fight back and kill them instead.
Oh.
Right. And it's really important, to understand that all the king allowed was for us to fight back. Right? The king didn't give us permission to start the fight. We just were given the chance to defend ourselves. And so we did. And when we win and don't die, we dedicated the holiday of Purim to remember this wonderful occasion. All right. That's the story. 10 chapters in 10 minutes. There's a lot more out there. Please read it. Notice the style of the writing, the characters. It's really amazing. It's one of the most, it's one of the most modern style stories in the Tanakh, but it's also one that you still have to really be trying to read between the lines to understand. Okay.
Who wrote the Megillah?
Well, we believe that it was written down by Mordecai at Esther's request, because that's what the book itself says, that Esther had Mordecai write this and send the copy to everybody everywhere. But it doesn't have a signature page. Right? There's no copyright page. Wish we had copyright pages in all the different parts of the Bible, but we can only go by what they say. And we're going to come back to how historical the story is in just a few minutes. But first, there's something very important, which is this story teaches a lesson about faith that is totally unique. This is the only book in the entire Tanakh, in the whole Bible, that never says God's name. Every other book, God is everywhere. God is the most common noun in the whole Bible, but not in this book. In this book, there is no God. Obviously, there is a God, but this book is trying to tell us that we have to see God, even without God's name, in giant letters. We have to see God in the actions. And Mordecai says it best. Right? When Mordecai is arguing with Esther, he tells her that you, out of all the Jews, will escape with your life by being in the king's palace. Right? Don't think that if you just sit there and say, well, nothing I can do. I guess maybe if Haman kills all the Jews, that's bad, but I'll be okay. Don't think that. If you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter. Right? We will be saved somehow. That's Mordecai's faith, that God will protect us. God will save us. Maybe not all of us, but we will as a people be saved. So instead, house will perish if you do nothing. And who knows, perhaps you have attained to royal position. Maybe you became queen for just such a crisis. Maybe this is why they took you and threw you into the king's house. Maybe it was so you could be right here, right now, to save the people. And so Esther decides, as we said, that she will bravely face the king and ask for protection for her people. So this whole story of Purim is about finding God and being the agent of God, even when you don't have a prophet telling you clearly this is what you're supposed to do. You need to find your way by using what God has taught us, by using what God has shown us, but not getting a giant glowing compass saying, do this, don't do that. No, you've got to use your heart, your head, and all the tools that we have. And that is why Purim is the last holiday of the year. Holiday of the year? Pesach. Pesach is where God carries us like a baby, right? When we are taken out of Egypt, all by God's power. God does all the plagues. God does all the splitting. God does the pillar in front of us. God gives us food. God gives us water. We are like God's hands. In Purim, we're adults. In Purim, God is still helping us. Front, God is saying, okay, I'll help you, but go on. Take care of it. You should be able to see what you need to do. Right? It's like any good grown-up. Eventually, you have to give the keys to the car to your kid. Drive off. And that's what Purim is sort of symbolizing. Use what God has shown us so that we can be that force of God in the world. And, of course, we can get rid of Haman, who was not good for anyone. All right, so questions? Onward. Did it really happen? Everybody loves to ask the question. Did it really happen? The short answer is probably. That is to say, we have good evidence outside of the book of Esther. Obviously, the book of Esther is evidence enough, but it's nice to look outside of the books to see what else is said. And when you match up the Persian kings that are mentioned in our Bible, up the actual Persian kings that we know of from Persian records and from Greek records, it fits pretty well. So Ahasuerus, right? Who is Ahasuerus? Well, it was Xerxes, right? Xerxes was one of the Persian emperors. Maybe you remember him from your classes in Greek history when Xerxes attacked the Greeks and had the big battle. The movie 300. Same king, right? That was Xerxes. He didn't actually look like a giant and have the nose thing in it. Right. But that was Xerxes, right? He was the one who tried to invade Greece. Xerxes wasn't called Xerxes in Persian. Right? That's the Greek name for him. I'll do my best here. Chishayarsha. Ahasuerus. Chishayarsha, right? It is much more similar. In fact, if you look at the Aramaic name that is used for this here, right? Hashirash, right? Right? It's the same name, right? And Ahasuerus, right? You can see the letters are the same. The sticking of an at the front of an Aramaic word is a standard practice for many, many things. It's just the way Aramaic sounds. So Ahasuerus was almost certainly Xerxes. So that gives us a time frame to work with. We know from the Persian inscriptions from Ahasuerus' time period that says that he was the ruler from Hidush, right, to Kushia, right, which you may know from the very first chapter of the Megillah. It says that Ahasuerus rules from Hodu to Kush. That's the area that he rules from, right, from the east to the west, that are used as the bookends. And as you can see, Hodu Kush, Hidush Kushia, the Aramaic, the Persian and the Hebrew are very, very similar. So seems to fit pretty well. We know from records, and I'm going to call him Xerxes just because it's easier. We know that Xerxes ruled from 486 to 465, which would mean then, according to the story of Esther, that the party would have been in his third year, 489 BCE. Now, 489, sorry, I went the wrong way for this. 3 BCE, because we got to go down years because we're in BCE here. So 483. That would have then meant that Esther was chosen at the end of the 7th year, which would have been 479. 9 have been important. Well, 479 was when he came back after failing to invade Greece. Right? We know when he tried to invade Greece. We've got good records for that. And it matches that his failed invasion of Greece would have been his return to his palace in Susa, Shushan. And he probably was looking for a little pick-me-up. He needed something to lift his mood since he had just failed to invade Greece. What's better than to come back to the palace and have a whole bunch of pretty girls, right? I'm really feeling mad that I didn't get to invade Greece. Birth of women, right? That's what emperors were like. And caught up in this process was Esther. Okay, so according to Greek sources, because we don't actually have any Persian records in this part, Xerxes had a wife whose name was Amestris. This is his most famous wife that he had. The Greeks, at least, of a wife called Vashti, however. The Greeks, who hated the Persians, remember the Persians tried to invade the Greeks, so they weren't exactly friends, they said that Amestris was a cruel queen who slaughtered her enemies. Well, you could take out the cruel, and she did kind of kill her enemies, right? If this is Esther, Esther did kill her enemies. And all of the people that were on Haman's side, they did get kind of wiped out. They said that she was born, Amestris, from a military commander, Otanas, but they don't mention her being Jewish. Now, her father in the Megillah is Avichail, which literally means my father, a warrior. Indeed, a commander, a warrior, that actually does kind of fit. And just as Esther was also known as Hadassah, he may have also been known as something else. He may have been known as Otanas. He may have had both of those names. Not 100% sure, but it's not bad. Plus, in case you're wondering, Amestris is actually really, really similar to Esther. So Amestris itself, the is at the end, that's Greek. Greeks love to put is's at the end of words, of foreign names, because that's how you end up with Xerxes, right? How you end up with that is at the end of Xerxes. Yes, that's just the Greek adding. So he would have had a wife named Amester. The core letters of Esther are stir, and because remember, the th in Esther is not really a Hebrew word or Hebrew letter. That's just the way we do it in English. So the sounds of her name are stir, and that means you end up with Amester and stir as being identical, apart from the m at the front, and the m adds and drops in many different cases. It's a common prefix for many different pronunciation styles. So it's quite easy to imagine that Amestris was Esther within the Persian lineage. Interesting to all of this, Artaxerxes, excuse me, who is the son of Xerxes and the son of Amestris, he's the guy who helped Ezra and Nehemiah finish the temple building and finish strengthening the walls of Jerusalem and made sure that the Jewish rule would be solid in Israel. If that's Esther's son, is it any surprise that he would help his mother's people? It's a little surprising that he was so helpful to our group in the little area of Judea. But if his mom was Jewish, even if he, because he was the new emperor, wasn't acting as a Jew, he still may have been helpful, loyal to his mother's people. All right, questions before we move on? Okay, looks like we're okay. So let's get down to the mitzvot. Let's get down to what we actually need to do to celebrate the holiday now. 4 mitzvot that go along with Purim. One of them is Mikra Megillah, the reading of the Megillah. One of them is Mishloach Manot, the sending of gifts. One of them is Matanot le'evyonim, which is giving gifts to the poor. And one of them is Seudat Purim, the feast of Purim, the Purim feast, your big meal. All right, we're going to go through each of these in a little more detail. So, everybody loves reading. As it says, this is from Rambam Mishnah Torah, everyone is obligated. Everyone has to read the Megillah. Men, women, converts, slaves, everyone. All right, this is not only a guy thing. This is an everybody mitzvah. You should also be trained to read it. Right? You don't leave the kids at home, you bring them, which is why we end up with lots of kids at Purim. Even Kohanim should neglect the temple service to come hear the reading of the Megillah. Right? That's how important the reading of the Megillah is. So don't tell me you're too busy. Now, you don't have to come to hear the Megillah reading as part of the community, although it's nice. But you can read it on your own as well. The reading is done both at night and in the morning of the next day. So we do a reading here as part of our community, but then in the morning we go down to the JCC Minyan and we read there with the whole community for the Megillah reading. So that's at like 7:45 in the morning. Hearing is the same as reading. If you can't actually read it, or you don't have your own copy, but someone else is reading it out loud to you, and you listen carefully, that is sufficient. First, to read it from a proper scroll. So the Megillah is written on a scroll, just like the Torah is written on a scroll. It's a lot smaller because it's a lot shorter of a book, but it's written in that same parchment with handwritten ink and all that perfect way. Make sense? Okay. What language do you read in? Well, again, coming from Rambam, one who speaks a language other than Hebrew and hears the Megillah read in Hebrew fulfills his obligation, even though he doesn't understand what is being read. So if you hear the Megillah chanted in Hebrew, even if you don't know Hebrew, right, it's still best to read it your own in whichever language is easiest for you so that you understand it. But during the Megillah reading, it's okay if it's in Hebrew. If it was written in Greek, he also fulfills his obligation, even if he does not understand. That's kind of a holdover from how Greek was used in the ancient world. If it is written in Aramaic or any other language, like English, Spanish, whatever, obligation only if the language is understood. Right? So if I read to you the story of Purim in Russian, and you don't know Russian, that's no good for you. It's no good for me either. I don't know Russian. But if I read it in Hebrew for you, then that is okay. Right? Again, Hebrew has a special place, and it for our understanding. So Hebrew is okay. Everything else you got to understand. Good. Gifts. Achmanot. There is the mitzvah of giving gifts to other people. Again, Rambam. Also, a person is obligated to send 2 portions, 2 other cooked dishes or 2 other foods to a friend. Based on the book of Esther, they were sending portions one to another, right? So this mitzvah comes straight from the book itself, where it says that people sent things to each other, known as mishloach manot. If one does not have the means, meaning you can't afford to give food away because you are so poor, you still do it. But what you do is you find another person, and I give you my food, and you give me your food, and now we both did the mitzvah. And both of us can still have food. So there's always a way to do it. You just need someone that's willing to trade food. Make sense? Do this. Now, is a friend. Find a person, give them an apple and a pack of cheese, and you've done it. You can give more if you like. That's okay. But that's the minimum to do, right? Make sense? Right. And this is based off the idea that everyone should be able to celebrate, and gifts make people happy, and especially food gifts are something that can be used right then and to make you happy on that day. On a gift card, they're not going to be happy and use it on that day. They're going to use it some other day. You give them an apple, now they're happy. They get to eat it right now. Good? Or, give them a candy bar. People like candy bars more than apples, I think. Matanot le'evyonim, the gifts for the poor. Also, because of the Book of Esther, one is obligated to distribute tzedakah to the poor on the day of Purim. At the very least, to give each of 2 poor people a present, whether it be money, cooked dishes, meaning food, or other food based on gifts to the poor. This is the quote. We should not be discriminating. That means don't go around looking for the best poor person. Don't go around looking for your favorite beggar. Give to whomever stretches out their hand. So maybe on other days, you're very, very careful of who you give your tzedakah to, who you give money to, who you give a gift to that's poor. On Purim, asks, give, right? That's your chance to do this mitzvah right then and there. So you see somebody
on the street. If you see
that's it. You see somebody standing on the street, and they're at the street light, and they're on Purim. Absolutely.
Oh, so that covers that.
That covers it. Yep.
What about another day?
What about
another?
Exactly.
We're going to cover tzedakah and other issues in another class.
Oh.
And it's nothing wrong with giving to people in those situations. Whether you have to give them is a much longer conversation. But on Purim, we should give to whomever we see as a chance to give. Because, well, actually, Rambam's going to say it very well in a minute, but we'll hold off on why because. We also have the mitzvah of the Seudat Purim, the Seudah. Seudah just means a feast, a fancy meal. The nature of our obligation for this feast, the Seudah, a person should eat meat and prepare as attractive a Seudah, a feast, as his means permit, right? So if you're very, very wealthy, then your dinner should be like the nicest dinner you're going to have all year. And if you're very, very poor, your dinner should be the nicest you're going to have all year. Nice for you, right? And what nice that you can afford. You don't have to go into debt. You don't have to waste money that you don't have. But it should be a very, very nice meal. You should drink wine until he becomes drunk. We're going to talk about that, and falls asleep. This feast, however, and a lot of people make a mistake on this, this feast happens during the daytime, not the night. Even though Jewish holidays begin in the night and then continue through the next day, right? That's why we have Friday night as Kabbalat Shabbat. We welcome Shabbat. And then all the way through Saturday, we celebrate Shabbat. And then Saturday night with Havdalah, we say goodbye to Shabbat. For Purim, this feast doesn't happen in the evening. It happens in the afternoon of the day of Purim itself, which this coming year is going to be on Thursday the 30th, I think. Something like that. Purim night is a Wednesday night, and so Purim day is going to be a Thursday. How we doing? Okay? Okay. However, about that feast, and in fact, about this whole celebration, again, coming from Rambam, it is better to be more liberal, to be more generous with your donations to the poor than to be lavish with the feast or the sending of portions to friends. All right, so let's imagine you've got a budget for Purim. You got $100 for Purim. Don't give $2 to the poor person and spend $98 on wine. That's not the right way to do it, right? It's better to make the gift to the poor the bigger part. That's where the extra should go. There is no greater and more splendid happiness than to gladden the hearts of the poor, the orphans, the widows, the converts, people who need help to be able to celebrate because they don't have other family or friends to help provide for them. That should be your focus. One who brings them happiness resembles to Shekhinah, God's presence, right? It's like you are like acting to them towards God. To the lowly and revive those with broken hearts, which is a quote taken from Isaiah. When a person eats and drinks in celebration, but locks the gates to his courtyard and does not provide for the poor and bitter souls, his happiness is not the happiness of mitzvah, but the such happiness is a disgrace based on, sorry, that should be like in quotes, dung on your faces and dung on your feasts, which is from the prophet Malachi. All right, so Rambam is really, bam, hard on this. He's saying, look, if you celebrate your feast and you've got your big party and you're just drinking wine and eating meat and all the poor people outside are starving, you're not celebrating with God. Right? That's just called pigging out. That's just being a glutton. About here. But if you celebrate with this, then you have to make sure you're also taking care of the people who don't have enough. And that turns your celebration into something beautiful. Back to drinking. A man is obligated to drink on Purim until he no longer knows the difference between cursed Haman and blessed Mordechai. This line makes people want to be Orthodox. It's so funny. You'll see people who they don't really care so much about reading the Megillah. They don't care so much about sending portions or giving to the poor. But I have to drink on Purim. They are absolutely convinced that God wants them to get plastered on Purim. Right. Not exactly. We're gonna take this apart, but what happens is most people stop reading at that point, and they don't keep reading in the Talmud what comes after. Rabbi Zera celebrated the Purim meal together. They got drunk, like really drunk. And Rabbah arose and slaughtered Rabbi Zera. He killed him, right? They got into a drunken fight and he killed him. The next day, he prayed and revived him, right? So he killed him. The next morning, he wakes up with a hangover. Oh, what did I drink last night? Looks over, and the guy's dead. He prays, the guy comes back to life. And next year, for Purim, Rabbah says, would the master like to come and we will celebrate the Purim meal together? And Rabbi Zeir says, a miracle does not occur every hour. Meaning, no, I'm not going to take my chances drinking with you again. You killed me. And this is meant to help cool the idea that you have to drink that much. Now, the idea of drinking, however, is still a part of our Purim celebration because drinking is part of how the miracle of Purim happened. The story happens because of drinking. And the end of the story, when Esther is able to trap Haman and get the king on her side, happens because of a drinking party. It is an important part of the story. The idea is, how do you drink enough and not too much? Well, there are some different interpretations the last 2,000 years. These are all different people who have written points of Jewish law that have tried to explain how much. So the Bach says one absolutely has to be so drunk that you can't even tell the difference between the two phrases. Remember, the two phrases were cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Have to be to not be able to tell the difference between those two sentences. That is really wasted, right? Because that's the only way you can explain the killing that happened in the story, right? The only way to explain Rabbah killing Rabbi Zera is to imagine that he was so drunk he couldn't even tell left from right. Okay, maybe. But Yosef, the Tosfot, two very major authorities, they say, cursed is Haman, blessed is Mordechai. It was actually talking about the song. Cursed is Haman, blessed is Mordechai. Cursed is Zeresh, blessed is Esther. Zeresh was Haman's wife. Cursed are all the wicked, blessed are the Jews. That, you can't sing the song. And it's a bit of a tongue twister. So that's only kind of like medium drunk. You can't sing a complicated song. And they say, the whole murder thing, don't take that literally. Right? That wasn't actually murder. He probably got into a fight. He probably did injure the guy, but don't think that it was like boom, cutting the head off kind of murder. So they weren't that drunk, just medium drunk. The Aguda, another authority, says, no. Arur Haman Baruch Mordechai. Those are the two phrases. Cursed is Haman, blessed is Mordechai. You should be so drunk that you can't do the gematria, the math. Haman and Baruch Mordechai, they both equal 502. But you have to do the math. Remember, in Hebrew, every letter equals a number. So if you add up the phrase, it equals 502. And if you get so drunk that you can't do the math, that's drunk enough. And that's only kind of light drunk. I don't think I can do that math right now. But it's light drunk. The kolbo, he says, no. Don't get drunk at all. Right? Drink, have a glass of wine, what we would call drunk. Because if you're drunk, it could cause sin. Right? A little drinking can help you be a little bit happier and feel a bit better. But drunk, if you don't know what you're doing, you're killing people. And in fact, he says that after they got drunk, there was death. It's to teach you not to get too drunk. It's to teach you to know that there's a limit. The Sfat Emet says it's not about being drunk or not drunk. It's about rejoicing. Keep drinking through the meal. Don't just drink once and then be done. Just let it continue to be there during the meal, but don't go crazy. The Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch says, have enough drinking. Right? Take a nap. If you're asleep, you can't tell the difference between anything. Right? And the Mishnah Berurah, which is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, very modern, 1800s, but don't go to sleep so much if you're not going to be able to do the other mitzvahs. Right? So you don't pass out and then don't wake up for your other mitzvahs, like doing Mariv in the evening and things like that. So drink, but drink reasonably. And if you can't tolerate drink, some people have very bad reactions to alcohol, just let yourself be happy. And it's important that we remember that Jewish people have always had a really good history of being happy without drinking. Unfortunately, nowadays, I've seen way too many people in the Jewish community and in the general community that think in order to be happy, in order for a party to be fun, there has to be liquor, there has to be booze. That's not true. Right? If you can't have fun unless you're drunk, having fun. You're just faking it with alcohol. Let yourself have fun and still be sober. It's actually a lot more fun. Okay, at least you'll remember it. What other things happen on Purim? Our prayers, there are some changes. We add Al Hanisim, which is very similar to the piece that we added for Hanukkah, if you remember our discussion of Hanukkah, and we do that in the Amidah. We don't recite Hallel. A collection of psalms that we say on Hanukkah, we say it on Pesach, we say it on Shavuot, Sukkot, we say it for all the major holidays. We don't say it on Purim, which is really weird. And the Talmud wonders, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? Because Purim is the kind of miracle God is saving us thing where we would say Hallel. Well, one, the Gemara says that reading the Megillah is like reading Hallel. The Hallel is a whole celebration and praise of God and of our thankfulness for being saved. When we read the story, it does the same job. And so we don't need to also read Hallel. We're covered. They also point out it didn't bring about redemption. Right? As amazing and wonderful as the story of Purim is, we're still part of the Persian Empire. And Ahasuerus is still the king and not a very good one. And yeah, Esther is now very powerful and Mordechai is very powerful and the Jews are better off. But we're not free. We're not independent. We don't have our whole life back together again. It's just, it didn't get worse. And, it didn't get worse. That's good. If you dodge a bullet, you should feel happy. Not you. The job isn't done yet. And so it wasn't a full reason. And plus, the victory happened outside of Israel. It wasn't part of being in Israel. It didn't bring us to Israel. It didn't establish us in Israel. It had less of a permanent effect for our people. So we still celebrate the holiday because we agreed that we would. That's mentioned in the book of Esther. But Hallel, we do have to recognize it was a limited victory. And so Hallel doesn't come in. Make sense? Okay. Hamantashen, everybody's favorite. Okay. They also get called Oznei Haman, which literally means Haman's ears. And these are pastries, cookies, depends how you make them, that have some fruit or filling. Usually they are three-sided like that. Some people say that it resembles the three-cornered hat that Haman used to wear. We don't actually know whether he wore the hat like that, but it's a good story. This probably became a tradition in the 1700s when pockets of dough filled with poppy seeds were becoming popular in Germany. And they were called Montaschen, which literally means poppy pockets. Montaschen, Hammentaschen, Mon, Hammon, it's not exactly a big jump. So we took a popular food. We can use that for our holiday because it sounds just like Haman, Haman, Mun, and boom, now we have a new treat. Now there were other treats as well. In fact, Oznei Haman, the older treat, but the original Oznei Haman didn't look like this. The original Oznei Haman were like fried pastry dipped in honey that looked more like an ear shape. But now, if you go to Israel, this is what they call Oznei Haman. So we recycle the names. Good. Okay. Carnival. You'll also notice that many synagogues and Jewish communities have a big carnival with games and prizes and funny things going on. The private feasts, in the afternoon, that's the actual mitzvah. But we like to add to the joy, the celebration. And that means we throw all these carnivals on. And ours is going to be the Sunday after Purim, which is March 3rd, I think.
I think Purim starts the 28th, February 28th.
Right. And it's the Sunday after is when we're doing our carnival. It's always a lot of fun. I'll be in the dunk tank again. Now, my kids were the most popular, the ones who gave the most tickets for that one. And it's a lot of fun. And there'll be other things going on too. So check the bulletin for more information. The other thing that is associated with Purim as part of the fun are costumes. People love wearing costumes for Purim. And since the miracle of Purim came about because of hidden identities, it makes real sense. I mean, think about it. Esther was wearing, Hadassah was wearing an Esther costume. Right? She was hiding who she was the entire story until the very end when she, Rara, I'm Jewish. And then, boom, everything changed. So the idea of who is a hero, who is a villain, blessed is Mordecai, cursed is Haman, all of the people being mixed up, that's why we wear the costumes. And I strongly encourage adults to wear costumes as well as kids. It's a lot of fun. And how many times do you get to wear a costume to shul? All right? So don't be embarrassed. I'll be wearing a costume. And that's it. That's Purim in 1 hour. Questions? Problems? Okay. Wow, I must have explained everything perfectly. Remember, if you ever have follow-up questions, just ask.